This Week in Economics from WBRN Radio and the Bostonred Network. The date is the 16th of July, 2019. Numbers Man here. This is our Numbers Man channel, known on some of the channels as the Numbers Man Show. Nonetheless, you can find us where you find Internet Radio, our podcast, Streaker, Speaker, YouTube, Apple, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and points in between. So we are there. Twitter feed, you'll find us also on that. You'll find us on Facebook. The show is out there. And what we're going to do today is try to sum up what is going on with the economy. Effectively, the economy, last time we looked, the Dow was at 2,700, which is a benchmark. But at the same time, the Fed is contemplating an interest rate hike, probably 25 basis points, we think. Our opinion from this mic is that that would not be a wise move. In fact, they need to... Did I say a hike? I'm sorry. That's our opinion. They actually wanted to decrease the interest rate by 25 basis points. That can be a problem. If you start lowering interest rates, you can get yourself in the opposite type of situation and bring about a scenario that Japan went through for 10 years, called deflation. Now, if you look at the economy and how it's actually performing, it is performing, but at the same time, basically some of the fundamentals are not there. And last week we talked about consumer confidence from the Confidence Board, and various other variables are at work there. Now, the effect of lowering interest rates is you create problems for the banking sector. Deutsche Bank, 18,000 people over a number of years would be made redundant. That's the largest bank in Germany. They are cutting back on their investment bank sector. They've already cut back, actually. I should get into the present tense here. So that in itself is a problem. But as you lower interest rates, banks make much less money on what they lend. Therefore, there is a fundamental problem. It also causes problems for various other people, savers. And as Mr. Nader wrote in his letter to the then chair of the Fed, in terms of pensioners, the Social Security rate is set at where the interest rate is at a given time. So whether or not pensioners are rewarded or they're not rewarded, it has a lot to do with that particular situation. So when you have very, very low interest rates, that puts a lot of stress on the banks. Now, the banking sector is important in the U.S. And has always been an important situation, but you also have something called a shadow banking that is out there. That is many of the other operations that are around, that such as annuities, etc., across the board, that provide income there. So it's not as straightforward as you would expect. Now, during the administration of Barack Obama, you had the conservatives calling for an increase in the interest rates. Now, at that time, it was a different situation. The U.S. economy was coming out of a depression, and when you come out of a depression, you have these additional tools, stimulus-type tools, quantitative easing, accommodation there, and various other things in the toolkit. You keep your interest rates low. But when your economy is performing basically about normal, now a little bit above normal, but about normal, you have the rate of unemployment at about 3.7%. during the administration of G.W. Bush, we talked about full employment being basically at 4.5%. So, in other words, you would have full employment now, but you don't have what you don't have at this point in time is compensation. Wages are basically flat. They were at the beginning of the Trump administration. Some of the larger employers boosted their rate. Walmart did by $1, and some others did also. Amazon pushed their rate up to $15 an hour, which is a benchmark, but the average rate is around $22, $23 an hour. That is when you add everything together. Now, again, we'll get into the job situation. Last week, we did not get that out. Now, this came out on July the 15th, but still it is relevant to what we are doing today from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And we'll take a look at China, an in-depth look at the Chinese GDP at 6.2%, which is good for China. There need to be some slowing down there. China has moved to a more of a domestic type economy, consumer-oriented economy, away from manufacturing. Now, this is another note to make. Under the present administration, they highlighted manufacturing as one of the things that they would spotlight, and they would make policies easier for manufacturing sector, also for the fossil energy sector. Now we see mining in the Arctic trying to move forward there, and in various other places. Now, the petroleum industry is a different type of industry, and it is a global industry. Now, the U.S. has moved to, because of fracking, something that is most harmful for the economy, to a number one producer. But once again, when you get slowdowns like in China, less product is being consumed, so you have to deal with that. Now, as far as manufacturing in China, yes, that has slowed down. But a few months ago, there was talk of the of the Chinese economy overheating. Now, yes, that can occur, but the Chinese Communist Party has seen to that. They had one time tightened up some of the lending standards. Now they loosen them a little bit, but at the same time, and they're doing some things to keep their economy above basically 6%. They've been talking about this 6.2, 6.5. The last quarter was a little better quarter, but in manufacturing, there are redundancies. And artificiality in the long term does not solve your problem. Back to the American situation is when you look at one of the other priorities of the administration was coal. Now, coal's problem is that they are, in terms of the so-called market, they have been, as they say, outgunned, we'll use that term, not a very economic term, by natural gas. So thus, coal companies are going bankrupt. They are forced to close mines, or being closed. But that is a leftover economy from the past. And normally those types of economies, over time, disappear. So they're disappearing. And the manufacturing economy itself, very tenuous. The administration has been what we used to call jawboning. One manufacturer, I can't remember what the manufacturer is now, that had 1,000 or so jobs available. I believe it was in Pennsylvania, it could be in Ohio, to keep the plant open. But that type of just simply will not work. It will work in the short term, but not in the long term. When we say long term, we're talking about a matter of months and not a matter of years. So that in itself, a modern industrial nation such as the U.S. just simply in 2019 cannot base its economy on manufacturing. It is a consumer-led economy, so how do you keep consumers booming along? Well, consumers have to have the discretionary income to perform well. Now, petrol prices are lower than last year, and salaries, wages are up, but they are flat. They simply just cannot keep up, period. And there's a lot of hidden inflation out there. Things are costing more. Now, that is the supportive scenario for actually boosting the interest rate and not decreasing the interest rate. So we'll get to the testimony, we'll read some of it, and hopefully we'll get some of the audio from the Chairman Powell and his testimony between the, in front of the House Finance Committee, which is chaired by Maxine Waters, a representative of South Central. Those particular hearings are under the auspices of a law enacted by Senator, the late Senator Humphrey of Minnesota, and the late Representative Augustus Hawkins. He was from South Central. So it is mandated that the Fed chair make that report. We don't make that clear. So let's now go to that July the 15th. This is again from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and where we deal with the household. We deal with the household survey here. Want to get this up now. The payroll, they still use non-farm. We skipped that basically. This is the 224,000 in June. The unemployment rate was a little changed at 3.7%. Job gains occurred in professional business services, healthcare, transportation, warehousing. This news release presents statistics from two monthly surveys. The household survey measures the labor force status, including employment by demographic characteristics, and the establishment survey measures hours, non-farm hours, and again, this needs to be changed, and earnings by industry there. So again, we get the unemployment rate at 3.7, number of persons unemployed at roughly 6 million, a little changed in June. Amongst major groups, for adult men, 3.3%, adult women, 3.3%, teenagers at 12.7%, Europeans at 3.3%, African Americans at 6%, Asians at 2.1%, and Latinos or Hispanics at 4.3%. Little changed there. The long-term unemployed, those jobs for more than 27 weeks, that is basically a half year, stands at, let's see, 1 point, let's see the rest of, actually let me just decrease this a little bit. Stands at 1.4 million in June. That is 23% of those that are unemployed are redundant. Labor force participation rate is 62.9, little changed unchanged over the years. So the employment population ratio at 60.6 for the fourth month in a row. Number of persons unemployed or employed, part-time for economic reasons. Involuntary part-time work is essentially unchanged at 4.3 million in June. In June, 1.6 million people were marginally attached, a little difference from a year ago. So these numbers are not moving around. Individuals were not in the labor force, wanted or available for work, and had looked for jobs sometime in the prior 12 months. Discouraged workers, we still have those around. 225,000 in June, little change from a year earlier. Discouraged workers are people not currently looking for work because they believe there's no jobs there. The remaining 1.1 million persons marginally attached to labor force in June had not searched. Now here's the establishment survey. Again, the payroll increased by 224,000. Employment growth averaged 172,000 per month thus far this year, compared with an average gain of 223,000 in 2018. In June, notably job gains occurred in professional services, healthcare, etc. Professional services added 51,000 jobs in June, following little employment change in May. May was plus 24,000 employment gains. The industry has averaged 35,000 per month in the first half of 2019, compared with an average gain of 47,000 in 2018. Healthcare increased by 35,000 over the month, by 403,000 over the past 12 months. In June, job growth occurred in ambulatory health services, 19,000 medical centers or hospitals at 11,000, transportation, warehousing, 24,000 jobs over 12 months. Over the months, and over 12 months, 158,000 over the past 12 months. Job gains occurred in couriers, messengers, 7,000 there, in air transportation at 3,000. That's a little unusual, these couriers and messengers, but we'll see. Construction employment continued to trend up in June. You would expect that at 21,000, in line with average monthly gain prior 12. Manufacturing edged up 17,000 following 4 months of little change. So far this year, growth in the industry was averaging 8,000 per month, compared with 22,000 per month in 2018. You can see the difference there. Employment rose in computer and electronic products at 7,000, and in plastics and rubber products at 4,000. Employment in other industries, including mining, wholesaling, retail trade, information, financial activities, leisure, and hospitality and government, showed little change. In June, the average hourly earning for all workers rose 6 cents to $27.90, following a 9 cent gain in May. Over the past 12 months, the average hourly earning has increased by 3.1%. Average hourly earning private sector production, non-supervisory type, increased by 4 cents to $23.43. Now you can see this, the average here, as opposed to the idea of $15 an hour, and there's a bill before Congress to increase the nation's minimum, which is at $7 and change now, to $15 by 2024, 2025 is ridiculous. Nonetheless, the average work week for all workers was unchanged at 34.4 hours in June. In manufacturing, the week edged up 1/10 hour to $40 and 40 hours, and 7 cents, while overtime was unchanged at 3.4 hours. The average work week for production workers held at 33.6. Changes in non-farm payroll employment for April were revised down from 224,000 to 216,000, and the change for May was revised down from 75,000 to 72,000. With these revisions, employment gains in April and May combined were 11,000 less than previously reported. You can expect this to happen because those months are pretty volatile months there. After revision, job gains have averaged 171,000 per month over the last 3 months. Now, the next release will be on August the 2nd, and we look at basically some civilian non-institutional population. This is in the thousands, 257, 642 is the number there. That was in June, and basically a little better in May at 258. And we'll append this on, and again in May at 258. It was 259 and 37 there. From the change from May of 2019 to June of 2019, 176,000. The civilian workforce at 162, and basically 162. The change was 335. These are in thousands. The participation rate at 62.9, 62.8 in April, and there's a 1/10% change there. Unemployed basically at 6,537.6 million. In other words, that was in April, basically about the same. And we look at basic people here. Unemployment rate, we had teenagers at 12.6. In April it was at 13, so teenagers doing a little better now in the summer. And in May it was at, let's see where we at, 12.7, and that's basically where we were for teenagers. For Europeans, 3.5 their rate. In May it was 3.1 and 3.3 and 3. In June of we start out in June of 2018 and end up in June of 2019. So we're looking here at Europeans. Their rate has went down 3.5 to 3.3. For African Americans, let's see, 6.5 in June of 2018. 6.7 in April of 2019, 6.2 in May of 2019, has went down and at 6%. So in other words, the change there is a negative 0.2. They have figured this out anyway, moving from 6.5, 6.7, went up a little bit, down to 6.2, and now at 6%, doing a little bit better. And basically Asians, a little better here at 2.1 in June, as opposed to 3.2 in June of last year. And for Latinos, they were at 4.6 in June of last year, now at 4.3. And if we look at education, less than high school diploma, they were at 5.6 last year, and now they're at 5.3. High school graduates, 4.1 and 3.5 basically. Some college associate degrees at 3.3. You can see the difference here. That would be last year, and now at back to 3. People with degrees higher, 2.3, and basically 2.1 is where they are. Job losers, persons who completed temporary jobs, 3 million there last year, 2,651 this year, and 2,736 in June of this year. And we'll just put that out here, and let me see what else we got going here. We won't really worry too much about some of this stuff. Manufacturing, we looked at that. Durable good manufacturing, it was 6.2, and then down, and then now the difference there is 0.2. Healthcare is doing very well. Hourly earnings last year were $27.05. This year it is in June it was $27.90. Yeah. And the Household Survey Establishment Survey both produce sample-based estimates of employment. Both have strengths and limitations. The Establishment Survey series has a smaller margin of error on the measurement of month-to-month changes than the household, because it's a much larger sample. Over the month, the employment changes about 100,000, statistically significant in the Establishment Survey, while the threshold for a statistically significant change in the household is about 500,000. However, the household survey has a more expansive scope than the establishment, because it includes the self-employed workers whose businesses are unincorporated, unpaid family workers, agricultural workers, private household workers who are excluded from the establishment survey. So household survey there are undocumented immigrants counted. This is the first time we brought this up. It is likely that both surveys include at least some undocumented immigrants. However, nobody established in our household is designated to identify the legal status of a worker. Therefore, it's not possible to determine how many are counted in either survey. Why does the establishment survey have revisions? The revisions are estimate to improve data by incorporating additional information not available at the time. The establishment survey revises its initial monthly estimate twice in an immediate succeeding 2 months to incorporate additional data there. On the average, the establishment survey incorporates a benchmark revision that are re-anchors estimates to complete counts. We're just putting this out here. Yet another 40% establishment survey sample is comprised of business establishments with fewer than 20 workers. The establishment survey sample is designed to maximize the reliability of statewide totals of non-farm workers. Estimate firms from all states, size, classes, industries are appropriate. Does the establishment survey account for employment from new business? Yes. The monthly survey estimates an adjustment to account for net employment changes generated by business births and deaths. You haven't heard that one out there before. And let's see. A lag from the quarterly census purpose because survey is not immediately able to bring new businesses into the sample. Is the count of unemployed persons limited to those people receiving unemployment benefits? No. The estimate of unemployment is based upon an average sample survey of households. All persons who are without jobs and actively seeking and available for work are included. Does the official unemployment rate exclude people who want a job but are not currently looking for work? Yes. How can unusually severe weather affect employment and hourly estimates? The establishment survey, the reference period is a pay period that includes the 12th of the month. Usually severe weather is unlikely to have impacted an average weekly hours than unemployment. Average weekly hours are estimated for paying time during pay periods, including pay for holidays, sick leave, and overtime. No, typically it's not possible to precisely quantify the effects of extreme weather on payroll employment estimates. So that is it. We'll leave that out there, and so you can understand the employment situation, and that in itself is the case for not raising interest rates. Now let's go to China. This is the Bureau of Statistics of China. The first half of 2019 faced with complex environments both at home and abroad under the strong leadership of the Central Committee of the Chinese Communist Party with the comrade, I'm reading here, Xi as the core, all regions and departments strictly making decisions and arrangements by the committee. We won't go much more into that. We'll move that down. See if we can. We may not be able to do that. Anyway, we'll try. So we can get the rest of it on our page here. Just hold on a second here. My pointer is going a little bit overboard here. We'll append this also. So we're just going to highlight the report here. Whoops. The GDP of China was 93 billion yuan in the first half of 2019, a year-over-year increase of 6.3 as compared prices. The year-over-year GDP growth for the first quarter was 6.4% and 6.2% the second quarter. The value added to primary industry was 2.7 billion yuan on a year-over-year basis. Growth of 3%. The secondary industry was 17,998.4 billion yuan. There, year-over-year, a growth of 5.8% there, and agriculture production was sound by embracing another bumper crop for summer grain. The first half of 2019, the value added of crop farming grew at 3.9% over the year and 0.5% slower than the first quarter. The overall output of summer grains was at 141.74 million tons, an increase of 2.93 million tons over last year, up by 2.1%, hitting the highest recorded as of 2017. The structural crop of farming was further optimized as planting areas for cotton, soybeans increased. The first half output of eggs grew by 3.6% year-over-year, and that of milk grew by 1.7%. The output of pork, beef, mutton, and poultry was 39.11 million tons, down 2.1%. Amongst the output of beef, mutton, and poultry grew by 2.4% and 1.5 and 5.6% year-over-year, while the output of pork went down by 5%. They've had some basic problems there, some swine diseases moving around. Industrial production was generally stable, with high-tech manufacturing accounting for the largest share year-over-year. The industry enterprises have the design and size was 6% and 0.5% slower than the first quarter. In June, the year-over-year rate, the total added to industrial enterprises above designated size was 6.3% and 1.3% faster than in May, up by 0.68% over the month. And an analysis of type of ownership showed that value added of the state holding enterprises were up 5% year-over-year, and that the share of state holding enterprises up 7.3%. Enterprises funded by foreign investors are investors from Hong Kong, Macau, Taiwan was up 1.4%. In terms of sectors, the value added of mining grew by 5.3% over the year. Manufacturing grew at 6.4%. Production and supply of electricity, thermal power, gas, and water grew by 7.3%. The value added of strategic emerging industries grew by 7.7% and 1.7% faster than that of industries above the designated size. The average add-on of high-tech manufacturing grew at 9%, very good there, and 3 percentage points faster than that of industry enterprise above the designated side, accounted for 13.8% of the total value added of the industry enterprises above designated side. Now, the output of new energy vehicles and solar cells grew by 34.6%, this is very good, and 20.1% year-over-year. The first 5 months of 2019, the total profits made by industry enterprises above designated side was basically 2,379 billion yuan, and that is down by 2.3% over the year, 11% 1.1% less than the first 4 months. The profits of industrial enterprises above the design size grew by 1.1%. The profits of industry enterprises above the designated side in May grew by 1.1%, while for April was down 3.7% year over year. The profit rate of business revenue of industrial enterprises above the designated size was 7.2% or 0.2% higher than the first 4 months. The service sector grew faster with modest service industry performed well. For the first half, the value added of information transmission, software and information technology services, that of leasing and businesses services, that of transportation storage, and a postal service, that of financial intermediaries, it grew by 20.6%, 7.8%, 7.3%, and 7.3% year over year respective, are 13.6 percentage points, 8.8% and 0.3 percentage there. In June, a business activity index for services was at 53.4%, continuing to stay above the 50 point. And this is usually what we have with PCIs. The business activity expansion index for services was at 60.3, staying at a high level. The first 5 months business revenue of service enterprises above the designated size increased by 10.1%. Business revenue of strategic emerging services, high-tech, and technological services demonstrated fastest growth, increasing by 12.5%, 12.3%, and 12% respectively, are 2.4% and 2.2% and 2.1% faster than the growth of a service enterprise above the designation there. Market sales demonstrate a stable and rising trend with higher growth rates and a share of online sales. This is the first half. It reached 19.521 billion yuan, up 8.4% year over year, and 0.1% faster than the first quarter. In June, the total retail sales consumer goods reached 7.8 billion year over year there. That would be 3 trillion. Anyway, we'll cut the shorthand here, and of 9.8% and 1.2% faster than previous months. Retail sales in urban areas reached 16,792.4 yuan, up by 8.3%, so their consumer strategy is working. Retail sales in rural areas stood at 2828.6. That is up 9.1%. Grouped by consumer patterns, the income of catering was 2127.9 billion yuan. That was up 9.4%. I think I'll just give the percentages here. Upgraded consumer goods grew fast. The retail sale of enterprises above designated size cosmetics grew by 13.2% year over year, and 4.8% faster than the total retail consumer goods. So that tells you a little bit about their economy. Import and exports grew slight growth there. The first half imports exports of goods was 14,667.5 yuan. Year over year, the increase was 3.9% and 0.2% faster than the first quarter. The total value of exports is at 7,952.1 billion. It was up 6.1%. Exports The trade structure continues to optimize. Imports and exports of general trade increased by 5.5%, accounting for 59.9% of the total value of imports and exports, an increase of 9/10 compared with the same period a year ago. Exports of mechanical electrical products increased by 5.3%, and accounting for 58.2% of the total value of exports. The total value of imports and exports by private industries increased to 11%, accounting for 256.19 billion yuan year over year, or 3.2%. Total value of exports was at 145.3 yuan here. The first half export delivery value of industry enterprises reached 5,836.1 year over year, and you guys get a percentage here at 4.2. And in June, the export delivery value of industry enterprises above size was 1.9% and 1.2% faster than in May. So it's growing some. Consumer prices increased mildly, and producer prices for industry there, consumer prices went up 2.2 year over year and 0.4% faster than the first quarter. Grouped by categories of food, tobacco, and alcohol went up 3.9% year over year. Clothing was up 1.8%. Housing up 2%. We'd like to see that go down a little. And for medical services, 2.5%. Healthcare up 2.6%. Other articles and services up 2.2%. In terms of food, tobacco, and alcohol prices for grain went up 0.5. Pork was up 7.7%. Fresh vegetables up 9.2%. Core CPI, that's something we also look at in terms of pricing in the U.S. Excluding price of food and energy went up by 1.8% year over year, or 1/10 percentage points lower than in the first quarter. In June, consumer prices went up 2.7% year over year, increasing at the same speed as last month. The first half, the producer prices for industry products were up 3/10 year over year and 1/10 faster than in June. And we wind this down here. We'll get to employment. Employment was generally stable. Urban areas, a total of 7.37 million, accounting for 67% of the whole there. In June, the unemployment rate in urban areas was 5.1%, and 1/10% higher than the previous month. Specifically, the survey of unemployment rate of populations aged from 25 to 59 was 4.6%, and 0.5% there. In June, employees of enterprises worked an average of 45.7 hours, slightly more than in the U.S. At the same time, the end of the second quarter, the number of rural migrants reached 182.48 million, an increase of 2.27 million over the last period, up by 1.3 and respectively there. Residential income grew faster than economic growth, and rural income ratio continues to narrow. In other words, per capita disposable income of residents was 15,294 yuan, a nominal growth of 8.8% year over year, 1/10% faster than in the first quarter. The real increase was 6.5% after deducting the price factor there. And per capita disposable income rural households was 778 yuan. a growth of 6.6%. Per capita disposable income, urban households was 2.74 times of rural households. So you can see what is happening there, and I'm not sure. You can tell they are very, very detailed, and the reason we brought this forth to you was generally you don't hear very much of it than the 6.2%. There was a lot more to this. Gains were consolidating the work of 5 primary tasks: cutting overcapacity, reducing inventory, and deleverage and lower costs, strengthening weak areas. In the second quarter, the capacity utility rate nationwide was at 76.4% and 0.5% higher than in the first quarter, 1% higher than the average in since 2013. Specifically, the capacity utilization of non-ferrous metals was at 3.4% and 1.7% and 1.7% higher than it was prior to that. And hopefully we'll come back here. Not sure what is going on here, but anyway, we'll end our report there at this stage of our game. And hold on just a second here. Nonetheless, we are back. Efforts have been made to advance the free critical battles. By the end of May, the balance of local government debt was at 19,895.3 billion yuan, and within the limits approved by the People's Congress. The political structure continues to optimize. In the first half, value added there. Tertiary industry accounted for 54.9% of the total. GDP at 0.5% higher than the same period last year. 15 percentage points higher than the secondary industry, contributing 60.3% of GDP growth, 23.2% higher than secondary industry in terms of industry enterprises designated size, etc. And the final consumption expenditure contributed 60.1% to GDP. Service consumption took up 49.4% of households, and final consumption expenditure at 0.6 percentage points there. A new layout integrating the development of eastern, western, southern, and northern regions is forming as a study progress was made in key regions, and they name the regions. Not sure why we're running on low power here. Doesn't make much sense. Anyway, nonetheless, we'll append Chairman Powell, and I guess we were losing some battery life here for some reason. Anyway, this will do it for those in business. Make it a productive rest of this week. For those consumers, keep your eye on the prize. As we normally do, we partner with Cranston Analytics here. This is MA at Cranston. Good day.